Cashamaniacs.
Geo Gearheads.
Welcome back to the Geo Gearheads. This is episode 459. I'm Daryl W4, back again with Chris of the Northwest.
Daryl, how are you doing?
Rather exhausted, but happy it's Thursday night. You know, another chance to get to chat about something I really enjoy too. And tomorrow's Friday. It's the end of the work week.
We've almost made it. It's Friday Eve.
Yeah.
Daryl, here in the Northwest, there's a nip in the air. You can see I've pulled out the flannel already. It's cold. And
we've had some cold. We've had some frost. And tomorrow, I think they're saying it's supposed to be 74 degrees here.
That's about right for the Midwest, right? Frost one day, a sunburn.
Pretty much. Yeah. So we're getting some weird storms coming through.
But what that makes is some beautiful leaves. So
yeah, I think it's actually knocking the leaves down.
It's knocking the leaves off the tree. Have you already missed the highlights of fall?
I believe we have. Now, here's the awesome thing. There's a park about an hour away from here.
Mm-hmm.
That's just beautiful. It's a wetlands built. It was built. It's not natural to offset the wetlands that were destroyed when they expanded Detroit Metro Airport.
Oh, okay.
And it's built as a nice park system. It's, you know, it's a really nice place to go caching and whatnot. I've only been there once, and I'm going to be there on Saturday because they're having a community celebration.
Lucky guy.
So yes, I'm going to get my community celebration in before the end of the year. And imagine what those trees are going to look like, because they do have a bunch of forested areas. I'm so excited to go out there and to bring my cameras.
Nice.
And of course, we're going to have to do a video for the channel with Renee and I. But it's going to be one of those that I bring the still camera as well, I think.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Which is kind of a non sequitur at this point, because my still camera is a 4K video camera as well.
Okay. That makes sense.
Yeah. But, it's, we'll get into this in a little bit, because today we are actually talking about caching cameras.
That's right.
But, I tend not to use the mirrorless camera as my video camera for geocaching, because it's just a little too unwieldy as a video camera.
Is it now?
Yeah. And it's, you're better off for that kind of stuff, I think, with a camcorder.
I think you are. Yeah. Just for the recording times alone.
Well, yeah, there's a lot of that kind of stuff. Why don't we actually just get into the caching camera, since we're already talking about it anyway?
We're already talking about it.
And I do have an order that kind of makes sense that I wanted to talk about this, because the number one best camera, I think, for geocachers is the mobile phone.
Mm-hmm. Well, the number one best camera is the one you have with you,
which is the mobile phone.
It tends to be the phone, because there are moments you thought, oh man, I should get that picture. I always find that with the phone, I can get some stunning pictures, but they're never quite what my eye sees.
Oh no. And it's not supposed to be, because the cameras are doing all that computational photography now. So what it captures is an idealized version, and a lot of that's built right into the chips. It's not even the phone post-processing it. It's built into the chips. So you'll get these beautiful sunrise and sunsets that you can't get with another camera. And the reason is it doesn't exist. The sensor is actually being recalibrated in those areas and then enhanced through software to give you that beautiful look.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the other thing that the mobile phone has going for it, even though they're usually not as good, that front-facing camera is perfect for getting those selfies in front of the Earth cache or the virtual cache where you have to go and do those photos.
Mm-hmm.
So it's hard to beat that. That's one of the things most of the other cameras don't do well.
Well, and they've got that wide angle lens on the front typically that captures a little more of what's around you without having to, hyperextend your shoulder trying to stretch it out or have to use a selfie stick.
Yeah, very true. So, that's great. That is the best one. And, you take your photos, you post them to social media, you go and add them to your logs.
Mm-hmm.
One of my favorite things to do, and this seems so obvious, but we're talking about it for photos now, is taking a picture of that cache location that you suspect is where the cache should be, the destroyed cache, whatever, and sending that message to the CO through the chat app or the chat function
mm-hmm.
in geocaching.com. So just having that camera for the documentation, getting those occasional photos, it is amazing. And it's just so easy to share.
And Daryl, being able to stick that camera in places I don't necessarily want to put my hands.
It makes an excellent mirror.
I've reached into the end of a guardrail one too many times with a wasp's nest in there. And like, okay, well, I'm done caching for the day because now I'm really angry. I should have looked ahead and I didn't. I rushed in there and now I'm paying the price for it. So being able to put the camera in there first and get the close-up of those wasps, isn't that lovely?
Well, and if you're smart, you get the video before they're all agitated so that, you got something to put on the channel to say, why you didn't get that cache.
Exactly. I'm claiming this one anyway. Look at what happened.
Yeah. Send it to the SEO. Yeah. So, and almost all cameras these days do both video and still. So it's kind of, a function of what you want to be shooting and what works best for you at the time. But there are certain things that certain cameras do better. But when it comes to, getting good stills, I still go for, a bigger, more serious interchangeable lens camera.
Mm-hmm.
That used to be a DSLR. Now I'm mirrorless, but only with one camera. I used to shoot a lot more than I do now.
Mm-hmm.
So it really doesn't pay for me to spend a whole lot of cash on cameras, at least not for stills. But the one that I settled on was the Nikon Z50, which is an APS-C sensor. That means it's a little bit smaller for the distance that you get. Doesn't do as well at giving you those nice, pretty photos with the soft out of focus areas because it is a smaller sensor. It's still bigger than your mobile phone by about 30 times? Does that sound right?
Sure. Let's go with that.
Because it's a little over a 1-inch sensor, and the chips in the phones are
pretty small.
Are they like a 1/16 of an inch or something? I think in the big ones. So it's more about 64 times. If I'm doing the math right, it's about 64 times the size.
So that's going to capture far more detail than your phone ever can.
Far more detail. It does better in low light without playing games.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And the beauty of these cameras, more than the sensors, are you get really, really good lenses that you can interchange.
And that glass
DSLR and mirrorless
makes all the difference. Now,
yes, it
Daryl,
does.
Is this officially a Micro Four Thirds camera?
No. Micro Four Thirds is smaller than APS-C. APS-C is the 1.5 crop factor over the 35 millimeters, which is considered full frame by most.
Mm-hmm.
So this is much smaller than the full frame, which is what I used to shoot most of the time because it is better. And I'd still like to do that, but it means bigger sensor, bigger glass. It makes a much bigger, heavier kit. So it's not as nice to take caching with you. You'll be happy you carried that camera with you when you've got those really impressive scenery shots that you want to get. And the bigger sensor also means it's easier to go wider angle.
Mm-hmm.
So I would love to get the new Z6 II.
Is that the
It's another mirrorless.
Not the predecessor, the successor to the Z50 is the Z6?
No, the Z6 and the Z7 were the ones that came out first. Those were the full frame mirrorless cameras.
Okay.
It started the Z line. Then they came out with the Z50 about this time last year as the small, not really entry level, but they're calling it the entry level for the mirrorless line because it is a good quality camera. It's missing a lot of the features that I would like, but it's such a small compact body, and it comes with, if you get the kit, because you can still get these as body only, but if you get the kit, it comes with at least the Pancake Lens is what they call it. So it's not a great zoom range, but it is so tiny. It's the size of some of the larger compact cameras. And this is a full-size APS-C sensor that does an amazing job in low light. It's really a nice camera. And that's not to say it's perfect. There's a lot of things that drive me nuts on it, but it's such a nice package that's really convenient to take out caching. I generally don't. It doesn't go out with me, and a lot of that is because I'm shooting video. And this is, even though this does a beautiful job with the 4K video, a lot of the stuff, most of the stuff probably that you'll see on the channel is done with the Z50 as our primary camera. And part of the reason why it does such a beautiful job is that it's using those really, really high quality lenses. And like a lot of the other mirrorless cameras, you can get the adapters to use your old DSLR lenses. So I've got some amazing glass for the old DSLRs. I can adapt them. It's not as nice as having the genuine mirrorless lenses. And overall, the mirrorless lenses have been doing better on the performance than the older lenses do because they're purpose built.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things is by getting rid of, and the big difference between a DSLR and a mirrorless camera is the SLRs have a mirror. Originally, the SLRs were, film based. So you would lift that mirror and expose the film. Now that we don't use film and we use sensors, you don't necessarily need to do that anymore. Instead, you just put that sensor back there and turn it into a video camera, and you can look through it and you don't need the mirror anymore. That makes it smaller, less moving parts, and it also means you don't have to compensate for that mirror that has to flip up and down and get out of the way. So now, especially your wide angle lenses perform better because they are that much closer to the sensor.
And faster, right?
Yeah, you can be faster as well. So there's all kinds of benefits to going for the mirrorless. Now, the downside is it will not give you the same quality image, and it's harder to focus using the LCD that you're actually staring at when you're looking in the viewfinder than if you're actually looking through a DSLR. So, and GSM times 2 says he hardly ever carries his DSLR to shoot video unless he's going someplace special. And the DSLRs do a nice job with the video, but especially for that, especially for video, the mirrorless do so much better because they're built for that. And they have the technology to actually focus correctly, whereas a lot of the DSLRs had to kind of hack it. Now, the newer ones are using a lot of the technology from the mirrorless cameras to do your focusing, but yeah, it's at this point the DSLRs. I love the DSLRs. Don't get me wrong. I've still got my D700 from years ago, and that's been my workhorse. I shot with that thing for like 10 years,
Mm-hmm.
and it's still going strong. It's still just, it works for me, and I'm a Nikon shooter. I'm not saying you can't get the same kind of stuff out of a Sony. You can't get the same stuff out of a Canon. I will say the Canon stuff, they have some amazing cameras out there, but watch what you're getting from Canon lately. They've had some real clinkers.
Interesting.
And, Canon makes great stuff. Don't get me wrong. You just have to kind of watch what you're getting. And Nikon was the same way a few years back. Nikon was making some really bad cameras. Sony has had some questionable cameras in their lineup as well. And a year ago when I got the Nikon Z50, I was really starting to think that Canon was going down the tubes.
Interesting.
It not as far as, going out of business, but as far as getting a good, well-featured camera, something that was actually usable. Because the stuff they were coming out with was not very good.
And, Daryl, it's really interesting. There aren't as many camera shops as there used to be.
There's almost none.
You tend to go to the big box stores, a Costco, a Best Buy, and or you order online to get these cameras.
Yeah.
Where you used to be able to, spend a Saturday at your camera shop and try out 2 or 3 of these cameras, play with them, get to know them, and say, you know what, this one works best for me. I like the way, everything's laid out and it makes sense.
Well, and to me, that's the most important thing, is finding that camera that fits in your hand, that really works the way you work. And I can use the Sonys. I have to wrap my head around it. I can use the Sonys. The Canon does not work for me. And part of the reason I think the Sonys make so much sense to me, even though it takes me a minute to step back, is because that was my first SLR, was the Minolta, which Sony acquired Minolta, and it became the Alpha line.
Okay.
So that's a still, even though it's a tremendously different interface, it's still very similar to what I, started shooting on.
When I first looked into buying a DSLR and figuring out, well, do I want to go Nikon? Do I want to go Canon? Do I want to go Sony? Which way do I want to go? The best advice given to me is find out what your friends use and get that.
Well, and GSM times 2 has a good point. Whatever you start with is usually the one you stay with because of the lenses that you buy. And it goes beyond the lenses. I've got strobes and stuff for the Nikon line. My friends all shoot Nikon now. I had a friend who was a Canon shooter that had an incident in one of the national parks where he got to replace his cameras for essentially free due to an insurance claim on it. And he switched to Nikon when he did that because he was going pro, and everyone he knew was shooting Nikon. So he moved from Canon to Nikon. And at that point, it was largely because Nikon was doing low light and Canon hadn't made that switch yet. But he's, 15 years later or whatever it is, he's still shooting Nikon. And we always have fun swapping our lenses around.
Well, Daryl, this time of year, going out, taking pictures of the leaves, you kind of want a camera that can handle a little bit of weather.
Yeah. And again, this is one of the reasons to not skimp out if you are going for the DSLRs or a mirrorless camera. The higher end stuff, and I'm not talking about pro level, I'm talking even consumer, can get weather seals on them. So make sure to look for that. If it has a flash, chances are it's not going to be weather sealed. So you can get some cases, some bags, essentially, that you can put the body into, but the lenses will still be sealed. So make sure that you're looking for that kind of stuff. The Z50 that I have is not weather sealed, but it is, kind of weatherproofed, but the
Water
lenses
resistant.
are not,
Hmm.
because they're small plastic body lenses intended to be lightweight.
Mm-hmm.
So that is a big thing. Make sure, if you're going to be intending to take this out, you get the ones that have the weather seals.
Or you get one that's designed to be underwater.
Well, underwater gets into a whole nother thing. And this is actually kind of diminished. You used to be able to get a lot more variety in the underwater cameras, but at this point, Fuji's only making one. Fujifilm, I should say, not Fuji. And that's the XP140. It's just a point and shoot camera. But I've got an older Panasonic that's the little periscope lens. So it's all internal
Mm-hmm.
zooming. It had some issues, and that's probably part of why they don't make those anymore.
Well, and I think, we'll talk about action cameras in a bit, but I think the action cameras have taken over that segment of the market.
Yeah. And you're still better off if you're looking for stills with one of those underwater cameras. Action cameras don't do very well at stills.
Mm-hmm.
But the other thing that's happened is you can take most of the mobile phones underwater. You shouldn't, but you can throw them in a case or something like that, and it will be fine. And those cases aren't that expensive. So people, I think, have started moving that way. And that's what's been killing a lot of those compact cameras.
Mm-hmm.
So,
well, and Daryl, I think you hit upon a good point. The action cameras don't take that great of stills, but I think the early cell phone cameras kind of broke us of pictures have to be great quality idea, where, as long as it's good enough, we're taking a lot more pictures than we ever have. So I'll just do good enough pictures with this camera and I'll still have the memories.
yeah, underwater though, it really makes more of a difference than it does above. In underwater, you'll find those optics behave differently. And if it's not a camera designed for underwater, you'll get more of the haze and the glow because it's, just not really engineered for it. So if that's what you want to do, get something that's designed for underwater. And a lot of the times that is going to be a more traditional camera with a case.
Mm-hmm.
But those cases will help a lot. But all around we've seen a switch from to what we can get, but away from the you used to be you could get those small cheap point and shoot cameras. You got a lot of the little tiny zoom cameras, but now that's really changed a lot. So you're not finding nearly what you used to find, but what you do have does produce some really high quality stills and or video. So right now, the one that I think is kind of the most interesting is Sony actually released the VZ1. That's
The V1.
what's that?
Zulu Victor.
Yeah, what did I say?
You went Victor Zulu, but
Oh, oops. Anyway, it's specifically targeted at vloggers. It has the windscreen for the microphone. It does lower video quality, but at higher frame rates if you want to. And it does the 4K 30 frames a second video. Now, the catch with almost all of these things that we mentioned so far is they will do like the 4K 30 or 60 frame video, but they have time limits. Anywhere from some of them are as little as 5 minutes of video to really like 20 minutes is the most. So it won't run for very long before it has to stop. And most of that is the heat dissipation. Doing 4K is tough.
Yeah. Well, I looked into the Sony ZV1 to replace the webcam that I'm using because it is designed to run video, 4K video for hours on end with a
As
clean.
long as you're not recording.
Right. As long as you're not recording with a clean HDMI output.
Yep.
So you can
If
take
you
that
are
out,
recording,
plug it in.
they have problems with the cards overheating.
Mhm.
So they've limited it. I believe it was only to 10 minutes on that one. I'd have to go and look that up again. But people had been reporting in the early tests, they couldn't even get 5 minutes before
Ooh.
the camera was overheating and shutting down. That was early tests. I'm sure they fixed it. But that gives you an idea of what the problem really is.
Mhm.
It is a problem with these smaller cameras. There's not enough room to get rid of the heat.
Right.
So it goes into the electronics that aren't necessarily
Mhm.
doing so well with it. But the cool thing with that one is it has this very cool tripod that you can use as a small selfie stick that has remote controls on it.
Nice.
And it's Bluetooth. So you could take the camera, put it in the tree, put it on a picnic table, walk away, and still control it from that tripod.
GSM times 2, who himself is a vlogger, says, who wants to watch 5 to 20 minutes of uncut video? 5 to 10 seconds a shot makes for better video.
Absolutely. But if you're out there trying to do something like vlogging, you'll take, rarely, but you'll take like 20 minutes a lot of the time with multiple takes, trying to get the scene right or waiting for something to happen. So,
Not GSM.
you're not going to.
He gets it right the first time.
Every
I'm the
time.
one that needs 20 minutes.
Yeah, I have to keep going and redoing it. Even then, it's almost never that I have a segment that's 20 minutes on the tape, but it happens, especially when I'm doing like an interview.
Mhm.
So it's an acquisition thing. You're not going to do typically 20 minutes of video in your final version. But think of it for if you're trying to do like a birthday party or something like that, there might be something that you want. So this is a reason to consider moving up to like a camcorder, which we'll talk about later. Because the other thing I wanted to mention for that good all around, if you're not into the interchangeable lenses
Mhm.
and carrying multiple lenses, doing all that stuff, there are some super zooms left, and these were really cool cameras. They're kind of lacking in just about everything except for they have a really impressive zoom range. So Renee has one I got for her years ago
Mhm.
that's still available, and I think it's under $500 now, which is the Nikon Coolpix P900.
Mhm.
It has like a 24x zoom range. So it goes from the equivalent of like a 28 millimeter, which is a fairly wide angle, to like 1,000 millimeters.
Mhm.
The thing's like a telescope that you carry with you and take pictures on.
Mhm.
Now, video wise, it kind of sucks.
I
But
had I had a super zoom for a mega zoom for quite a while. Absolutely loved it. I
mhm,
love that I could get that much, glass in this small little compact body, and it took great pictures,
yeah,
but the motor pushing that zoom in and out over the years finally failed.
yeah,
Yeah,
they're not as durable.
right.
The lenses aren't as good. The glass isn't nowhere near the quality, but it's nowhere near the price. It's nowhere near the weight. It's something that really is handy to take with you. Birders tend to love these things because it is such a big long lens and such a small package
Mhm.
that you can zoom in and get those shots of the birds. So if that's what you're looking for is the wildlife when you're out hiking, look at the super zooms. And I don't think the P900 is necessarily the right camera for you at this point. There are successors to it that I don't think are as good though. And one of the problems is now they have to try to pack in the video features. And this
Mhm.
did do 1080 video, but it was terrible. Don't don't even think about doing it.
Now, once you push into it, mine would do, um, optical zoom up to a point and then push into digital. And once you did that on video, the thing was unwatchable.
Oh yeah, no, digital zoom generally isn't worth doing.
Mhm.
However, they have gotten a lot better with it.
Mhm.
So it is an option now for stills. I wouldn't do it for video usually because it doesn't hold up very well. But it does give you that better than cropping and resizing, because they're doing some intelligence in that process now that you can't do after the fact.
GSM times 2 says, and for video, that motor can be heard in the video. I find that I do most of my zooming post-production. It's a huge advantage of 4K over 1080.
It is. And we'll probably talk about some of that later. But on the lines of video, if you are doing video with any of these cameras, it is worth looking at doing an external microphone. The microphones in these cameras don't do well with wind noise, nor do they do well with the noise of the cameras. And almost all of the cameras will make some noises as they focus or as they zoom. So getting that microphone off the camera and onto the hot shoe or cold shoe will help tremendously. And you can tailor your microphone for what you're looking for. So if you want something that's going to be a little bit better for grabbing those guys right in front of you, get a nice little shotgun mic, that kind of stuff. Isn't that expensive to get a cheap one. And a lot of those cheap ones, I got one for like $60 from Rode, I believe it was, that includes the fuzzy windscreen. They call them dead cats.
Yeah, I know.
I've got a more expensive one that I had to buy that for, but it's a huge difference between the $60 one and the $200 one that I got. Actually, we'll call it $230 because I had to get the windscreen for it still. But the difference is huge, but the size is enormous. And a lot of the time, I will take this smaller one because the bigger one will still show up on video. If you look at our channel, you'll see the fuzzy windscreen sometimes blowing into the top of the frame.
And, Daryl, you didn't say, but those windscreens make all the difference when you're shooting video outside. It's amazing how much just a breeze past that microphone.
I was just going to say it really makes a huge difference. And if you can't afford to get afford as in not necessarily cash, but the extra, hassle, because you have to plug those things in, and not all cameras will support the external microphones. They may not have the jacks that you need. They might not, some of them are wireless. I don't recommend a wireless shotgun. It will do well for, because wireless is usually Bluetooth, which isn't very good anyway. But it will do better for things like the lapel mics. And if that's what you're doing, if you're doing the walk and talks, there are some options for wireless microphones. They're not necessarily cheap, but that will help your audio even more than having the on-camera microphone. Because if it's on camera, it's not going to necessarily get you talking with someone, especially interviewing.
Right.
So, microphones get into something else entirely, and it is worth talking about and investing in if you're really looking to do a good job. Let's get into the action cameras, though.
Earlier on, we talked about action cameras, and we said we were going to come back to them, and I think now's the time. Now, when people think action cameras, the best marketing campaign out there right now is GoPro. Oh, we got to get a GoPro.
Yeah, well, and everyone knows GoPro. They're the ones that made the whole space. But there are some other really interesting action cameras out there. And it really depends on what you want. Do your shopping. Almost everyone is emulating the GoPros. There's a couple, though, that I wanted to mention because they're really cool. Insta360, excuse me. Insta360 has amazing stabilization.
Now, the Insta360 is an action cam, but it's not an action cam like you're thinking of as a GoPro. This thing is tiny.
Yeah, this is the Go. They also have another action camera that we'll talk about in a little bit. But the thing I like with the Insta360 Go, it's a little like pin almost.
Mm-hmm.
You clip it on. It doesn't matter what your orientation is. It's going to square that up for you, and it's going to stabilize it.
Oh, interesting.
So it's going to take care of getting all of that video stabilized. It's going to, it's just an amazing little, I'm going to have this with me to record everything I do.
Mm-hmm.
Think of it almost like a body camera.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's small. And it ties to your phone.
Yeah. It can tie to your phone. There's a lot of little attachments for it. You can get a little kind of selfie stick, or you can get a magnetic necklace so it can hang around your neck. You can get a headband, and we're talking $230.
Yeah. So it's not cheap, especially because it's only 1080.
Mm-hmm.
But for what it gives you and the flexibility, it's pretty impressive. I've never actually used one, but I kind of always drooled over them because it just is really a cool concept. And I like that concept. It's kind of life logging almost.
Yes. Yeah, it would be. Just put it on.
I think they even have their story mode that will auto cut it for you. So if you literally just want something to grab like the highlights of your caching trip,
mm-hmm.
This is probably a good contender for you because you clip it on, put it on the necklace, whatever you want to do, run around. And then if I understand the way it works correctly, you hit the story mode and it's going to go and create the video for you of your caching trip from the video that is captured. It's pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
Now, getting into the more traditional action cameras, the two that I keep hearing are really good, and they're not necessarily the cheapest out there, but DJI's Osmo Action is supposed to be an amazing camera for the price. And I definitely like this better than the Hero. It has the screen on the front so that you can use it as like a selfie camera. And it's I don't want to say it's more rugged, but it definitely seems to be better at handling it. There's also the Insta360 One R. This is a really ingenious design. I'm not sure it's going to be as rugged because it's modular. You can swap out the camera modules with this. So essentially the camera itself is 3 pieces. It has the base that includes the battery and everything, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
Then it has the control module, which is your screen and recording and everything. And then the camera module. So if you're using the single camera modules, you can flip it to the screen either being forward or back facing. That's a pretty cool concept. I like that. But what makes it even cooler is it has a twin lens so that you can do 360 videos with it. So I'm not sure that really makes a whole lot of sense, to be honest, but I love the flexibility of the system. And one of the really amazing things is they have a very expensive 1-inch sensor. So if you're looking for that really high quality video from an action camera, these guys have a really high quality camera for you. It's going to cost you a pretty penny, but I think it's worth it.
It costs a little bit. But it's got some software features that DJI has put into their drones.
For the Osmo Action.
For the Osmo and I'm sorry.
Insta360.
Insta One. The
Insta360 One is using the technology that they've developed for their 360 cameras.
Right. Thank you.
And they have amazing stabilization.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're looking for the stabilization, I am getting the impression from everything I've been hearing that the Insta360 is kind of the way to go. You know, they just do it better than almost anyone else.
You can tell them both to mark an individual. And so if you're following that person, it will keep that video centered on them.
Yeah.
I don't know how. It's magic.
Well, they are not using the full sensor for the video. So you get some play in there. But it also means that you do have some weird artifacts at times. So it's not perfect, but it's an amazing job for such a small little camera.
Mm-hmm.
Getting into the video and the camcorders, though, this is where if you're shooting video, I think the camcorder is still the king of the hill. I went and got the Canon G50. Not a cheap camera, but it wasn't terribly expensive. You'll get better zoom. You have essentially an unlimited recording time. It's as long as your battery can last, because they're built for this. They have the space to do the heat dissipation. They do a better job of silencing the motors than they can in some of these other cameras that we had before. But it is a bigger, bulkier package. That said, I find it easier to shoot as I'm moving with a camcorder than with a still camera. The still camera, I have a better job shooting from a standing position for stills. That's what it's for. But even standing still, the camcorders, I can do a better job holding still than I can the still camera. So,
you've got more to wrap your hand around. You can
and
use
it's a different way to grab it, because the camcorders typically you're grabbing in like that tube coming off your eyes. The stills, you're intended to grab the grip and the lens. So it's easier to get a good still with that stance. It's easier to get very good or reasonably good video, motion with the other stance. It's you're taking advantage of the short time that you'd have to hold it for a still with one mode, and it might not be as comfortable or stable for a short time, but it's more stable over time with the other grips. So yeah.
And you're going to get a better zoom for video out of a camcorder than you are going to out of a DSLR.
Well, and one of the things that drives me nuts with using a still camera is if you want to do a zoom on camera, with recording and zooming, it is built for that when you get the camcorder. If you get the still camera with the interchangeable lenses, you have to get the lenses that are built for that, or you'll get some jerking.
Right.
Because that's not what they're built for. They're totally different. So, it's a matter of getting the right tool for the right job. And this is what GSM Times 2 is saying. He has to agree with me. If you want great pictures, get a camera. If you want great video, if you want to shoot video, get a camcorder.
Right. Now, that camcorder isn't cheap. It's $1,000 plus, depending on where you can get it. So
yeah,
it's going to cost you some money, but if you're doing video all the time, it's really the way to go.
Well, and there are better cameras than this by far. This camera has been driving me nuts because it doesn't do a good job with a white balance. You have to manually white balance this one or it gives you problems. It's, it's annoying, but I work around it because it's better at other things. Now, the other thing I find interesting, and this gets really geeky. The Canon G50 is 150 megabits a second. Your average still camera, your average video camera is only 100 megabits a second. So you're getting more information better. It's lower compression than your regular camera is. So one of the things I found, it tends to do better if you have to crop in because it's not as compressed. And if you have to do some minor edits to the video, it tends to work a little bit better. So it's still not, professional level by any stretch. But Canon does make some versions of this camera intended for the pro market. So if you really, really want to get that, Now you've got that camera that has the XLR inputs for your high quality microphones. You can even get some of these. I don't think they go that small with this one, but you can get it, where you have the sync and time code on the cameras.
Okay.
So they take these little camcorders, make consumer versions of them, and then beef them up into professional level stuff. And usually they kind of go the other way. But it's interesting that they're going that route. The sensor is a good quality sensor, and then it's just all of the stuff they wrap around it. Build the sensor, build the lens. Now let's get everything else working. You improve the controls a little bit. You give it the ins and outs that the pros need, and now it's a pro camera. You take that stuff off, and now you have a smaller consumer camcorder that's a little cheaper. It's still not something that they're going to use for broadcast, but for industrial video, for wedding shooters, that kind of stuff, yeah, it does pretty well. Mm-hmm. But they do have some cameras that do a lot of the shows and whatnot. But this is camcorders. There's still a wide variety out there. There's just not as much for the consumer as there used to be. But what you are finding are the bigger, better, not necessarily bigger as in the size, but they're the higher quality cameras. And they're going to do a better job by far than anything else you can find at that one specific going and shooting video. Now, if you take a mirrorless camera and kit that thing out, it's going to be expensive, but it is going to do a better job than most of these cameras do. And again, it's going back to the glass. Mm-hmm. But you're going to be spending, a good cine lens, CINE, for cinema, is starting at about $300 for a fixed focal length lens. And that's just the lens. Then you have to get a bunch of other stuff to do the focus, and it's manual focus. So, and that's the other thing, is that the camcorders tend to do a better job with the focus than most of the others. But I should note that the ZV1, that Sony that we talked about, the vlogging one, mm-hmm, does an amazing job with the focus. And it has some focus modes that you don't get in the camcorders, specifically targeted at vloggers.
No, those vloggers.
Well, one of the really bizarre things, and I could see this being a lot of fun for the geocaching vlogger type peoples, mm-hmm, is it has what they call showcase mode. So you put this thing out in the tree or whatever, you start talking to it, hold up the cache container. It's going to focus on the cache container because it recognizes that motion of holding it up. It focuses on whatever you're throwing in front of it. It doesn't try to focus on you. And almost all the cameras look for faces to focus on.
Right. Faces or eyes.
Right. So what it does on most of the cameras, you have to hold it in front of your face. This one, you just hold it out so that you can still be visible and talking. It's an ingenious little add-on that they made. And I think that is the big reason they've sold so many so far. For the, especially for like the beauty vloggers, mm-hmm, that's key.
Oh, Daryl, thank you.
All right.
Okay. oh,
talking
not that.
About cameras for hours, right? No, only about 50 minutes. I want to make one more mention though before we go. Fun cameras.
What? Well, all these cameras are fun.
They can be, but I had to mention the Fuji Instax SQ20. It's your Polaroid style camera that everyone always thinks about, but this one is a little different. It's a square picture, mm-hmm, hence the SQ20, but it's a digital camera that gives you the option to print.
Oh.
it doesn't necessarily print right away, but it is still printing onto film.
Okay.
There's also the zinc printers that give you little, like business card size photos. Those are kind of cool. I got the printers for the a printer. I have printers for the Instax Mini and for the Mint. No, not Mint. Zinc. The zinc ones. And the cool thing I like about the zinc, it's just kind of a plain paper. And the older versions, at least that I have sticky backs. So you can peel it and stick it right into like a photo album or a scrapbook or something like that.
My
They
daughter
don't look as good.
and her friends are really into these little tiny Polaroid cameras that print. You take the picture and it prints it right away in a Polaroid. Yep. And they think it's just the coolest thing. Have you ever seen this? Oh yeah. Yeah. Years ago.
Mm-hmm. Well, but these are different than the old Polaroids are. These are tiny little photos.
Mm-hmm.
They're not very big. Now the square I like because it is the square format, so you don't have to worry about orientation. And that was one of the things I loved about medium format was you get into like the Hasselblad, and I've still got a Mamiya up here that it's freeing because you don't have to worry about the orientation of the camera. You just take the picture. It's a square picture.
Right.
And it's kind of the same thing here, but you can go and shoot all of these photos digitally and then print the ones that you want. You can make multiple copies, which you can't do with most of the Instax cameras. I really like the Instax cameras though over almost any of these other little self-printing cameras.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's something about the form factor of that film with the border around the edge that really makes for fun. Hang it up on a photo walls.
Exactly. Get yourself a little clothespin.
Yep.
And hang it up.
So we have in our powder room downstairs a frame with strings and clothespins that has all kinds of photos of the puppy in the different Instax, because I have the old Instax Mini and I have the square. So we do both. And we've got photos that we printed onto the Instax from the phone.
Okay.
On another one that has the string, and it's just Renee and I. It's kind of cutesy, romantic, still newlywed kind of thing. It's all it's not all, but it's all of trips that we've taken.
That has to be Renee if you use the word romantic, because Daryl, that does not describe you.
Yeah,
as far as I know.
I was gonna say, hopefully that's not something you know. But they do have printers for all of this stuff too. So rather than necessarily getting the camera, sorry, that one just stopped me in my tracks. GSM Times 2 says, OMG, I thought Daryl was going to say he had a camera in his powder room.
No. Yeah, live streaming 24/7.
No.
We'll give you the address a little bit later.
Yeah, it's behind the paywall. But if you want to be printing from the phone, you've got all of these instant film types. The Zinc, the Instax, that they have printers for about $100 or less. So you can print off that. There are also like 4x6 printers if you want that more traditional photo, that you can print them out and put them on the cork board or on the fridge, whatever you want to do. I used to have some cables with magnets. One of the most cool things that I had done in my office.
Nice. Daryl, I think we've talked enough about cameras tonight. The most important thing is get outside, take some pictures. Doesn't matter what you have.
Yeah, and it's always fun to get out there and take the pictures. And it's not necessarily the memories. It's not necessarily the documentation. It could be pretty. It could be all of those things.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Just get out there, shoot, have some fun. I love going out and shooting, and I don't do enough of it, especially since I do the YouTube stuff now. It's all video all the time.
You've been
But, yeah.
converted to the dark side.
Yeah, but it is fun. And what better way to make memories than make videos and post them to YouTube?
Oh, there are other ways.
Okay. Such as?
Oh, I can't tell you. It's being romantic.
Okay. With that, I think we better take off. Just a couple of notes. So we have the next 2 shows posted, and you won't find these necessarily on Facebook because Facebook won't let us post more than a week out. It won't let us post a week out. We have to be less than a week. So you can find the upcoming show list on YouTube, not on Facebook. But next week, the 29th, we're going to be back with Rock Chalk, and he's going to be talking about the geocaching.com search functions, specifically that advanced search. So, send us in your comments and questions on that at geogearheads@cacheamaniacs.com, because we really want to get some feedback from him. And the thing, I'm still, as we talked about before, using the pocket queries. So I'm looking for a little bit of encouragement to actually switch over. So if you have any questions about the advanced search, drop us an email at geogearheads@cacheamaniacs.com so we can get that on the show. Then the following week, the first show of November, it's going to be Randomize CII. 2 I's.
Like the Cy Young Award.
Oh, maybe. But yeah, that should make you happy, Chris. We're going to do another randomized show.
I love those randomized shows. They're just a lot of fun.
Oh, they are so much fun. And of course, you can send in feedback for any of those shows to geogearheads@cacheamaniacs.com, including what cameras you like and why. Or, if you have opinions that differ from ours, definitely let us know as well, because we're certainly not covering everything in this one show.
No, and you're allowed to have opinions different than ours. We don't see
it's election season.
But you're allowed to.
It's election season in the U.S.
Oh,
there are no other opinions allowed. It's only ours.
Yeah. Oh, you know what? If you can't wait till next week, go check out the Cacheamaniacs website at cacheamaniacs.com for more on the Geo Gearheads, including show notes for this and all of our episodes, because we love hearing from our listeners. So leave us feedback by emailing geogearheads@cacheamaniacs.com or through the many channels of social media. Your support helps keep the Cacheamaniac shows coming. Please consider becoming a patron through the link on our website to support the Cacheamaniac shows. Geo Gearheads is produced by Chris Umfenauer and Daryl Wattenberg. The show is copyright 2020 by Daryl Wattenberg. All rights reserved.
Cash with the Cacheamaniacs.